About Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, child.
She must have been absent the day in kindergarten where they did the lesson. If you've got nothing good to say, don't say anything at all.
When you live in London, you do sometimes come to the US and you think, what on earth is going on here? This place has culturally gone off the reservation on the left.
The blame game continues on the left as Democrats look for answers to their crushing election loss. So where does the party go from here?
Our panel of Richard Fowler and David Avella weigh in, but first, a Fox News alert.
A bombshell criminal complaint revealing the depths of the Iranian regime went to in an attempt to assassinate President-elect Trump and an Iranian-American dissident on U.S. soil. Hello, I'm John Roberts in Washington. Welcome to Monday, and welcome to the Hammer, who's here with us today. Good to see you.
It's good to be here. It's good to be awake. I feel like I needed multiple weekends after that.
Hammer down last week.
Thanks. Good to be with you, John. I'm Jackie Heinrich. Sandra Smith has the day off. This is America Reports. An unsealed court filing charges 3 men in connection to the failed murder-for-hire plots. And according to that document, one of the suspects, who is still at large, told the feds he was instructed by an official in Iran's military to come up with a plan to take out Trump.
Threats from Iran and other U.S. adversaries putting a focus on our porous border. President-elect Trump taking his first big step to make America safer by naming former ICE Director Tom Homan as his administration's border czar.
We have Fox News team coverage. Morgan Ortegas will join us in just a few moments with analysis. Lucas Tomlinson will have the latest on the President-elect Trump's transition process.
But we begin with David Smutt. He's live here in Washington with the latest on the failed Iranian plot to kill Trump. David?
Well, John and Jackie, it really is all hands on deck between the FBI, CIA, and other intelligence agencies to watch Iran and the growing threats towards the president-elect. The threat stream is there daily and continues to intensify, Fox News is told. The FBI right now looking for a 51-year-old named Farhad Shakiri. They believe he's in Iran. Getting him here is not going to be easy if they get him here at all. According to this criminal complaint unsealed on Friday, Shakiri worked with Iran's Revolutionary Guard on an active plan to kill the president-elect. Shakiri demanded large financial sums in return. As stated in the criminal complaint, Shakiri indicated to an IRGC official that this would cost a huge amount of money. In response, the official said that we have already spent a lot of money, so money's not an issue. Now, Trump, as we've been reporting for months, has been on the radar of Iran's radical government since he ordered the killing of Iranian National Guard's leader Qasem Soleimani in January 2020. Officials see these plots, and there have been several, as a chance for revenge. Law enforcement sources also tell Fox Iranian-American dissident Masih Alinejad was also a target of this foiled or interrupted plot. The DOJ says Shakiri worked with 2 men based in New York City to surveil and murder Miss Alinejad.
I don't deserve to be followed by killers. 3 attempts on my life. I'm only 45 kilos. I'm not carrying any weapons. And the Biden administration advised me to go under witness protection. It means that I have to get disappeared. I don't want to get disappeared.
The 2 suspects who authorities say Shakiri hired to kill Miss Alinejad in custody, but the one they want, John and Jackie, the mastermind Shakiri, who's in Iran, and again, I said it's going to be tough to see if he even comes to the United States. If they
all right, so, charges from the DOJ are one thing, but what's the administration doing in terms of...
What's the reality?
Yeah, sanctions, anything else, any other kind of action?
Nothing else, just charges.
All right.
2 in jail, looking for 1.
Well, that may change as of January 20th.
Possible.
We'll see. David, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. President-elect Trump is building his administration, asking former ICE Director Tom Homan to step up as border czar. Trump saying there is, quote, nobody better at policing and controlling our borders. Lucas Tomlinson is in West Palm Beach, Florida, with more on this. Hey, Lucas.
Hey, Jackie. President-elect Donald Trump was elected in a landslide with a mandate to fix the southern border. Now he's picked Tom Homan to help him do it. He spoke earlier on Fox and Friends.
Every morning I get up. Every morning I'm pissed off about what this administration did to the most secure border in my lifetime. So I'm going to go back and do what I can to fix it. Thousands of retired agents, retired border patrol agents, retired military that want to come in and volunteer to help this president secure the border and do the deportation operation.
Now, to help Holman, Stephen Miller is expected to be picked to be Trump's new deputy chief of staff. He served in the first Trump administration as a senior policy advisor focusing on the southern border. And while awaiting confirmation from the Trump transition team, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance posting on X, quote, "This is another fantastic pick by the president. Congrats, Stephen M." Trump also announcing his new ambassador to the United Nations, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, whose questioning on Capitol Hill led to the ouster of 2 Ivy League presidents. This means the narrow GOP House majority will be even smaller. It will likely be months before a special election in New York to fill Stefanik's seat takes place. Here's Chad Wolf, who's being considered to be DHS secretary, a position he held in an acting role during the first Trump administration.
Poll after poll after poll said that this is what the American people not only cared about was the border security and that immigration enforcement, and they wanted to see more of it.
Now expect more candidates to fill Trump's cabinet to be flying here to Palm Beach to join President-elect Trump in Mar-a-Lago for more vetting this week. Jackie?
Thank you, Lucas. Appreciate it. John.
All right, so let's bring in Morgan Ortagus, a former State Department spokesperson and founder of Polaris National Security. So the DOJ is filing charges against Farhad Shakeri, an unnamed person who's a member of the IRGC in Iran, is also named in the suit, but nothing that looks like is going to happen. And remember, the Biden administration seemed to indicate that going after Trump would be an act of war. This is what Matt Miller said.
We strongly condemn the brazen threats, and we have made clear that should Iran attack any of our citizens, including those who continue to serve the United States or those who formerly served, that Iran will face severe consequences.
Face severe consequences, but there don't appear to be any. I mean, there's charges against this guy Shakeri, but nothing much else is happening.
Well, my question is, where were these harsh words from the Biden administration 3.5 years ago when we learned about these threats? They have been extensively reported on. Thanks to you, John, for allowing me to come on your show all these years and talk about it. It's been in print media. We know these threats have existed from the Iranian regime. They also have meddled at an unprecedented scale in our election, trying to tip the scales in favor of Kamala Harris. We know they were also funding anti-Semitic protests on our college campuses and around the country. So it is truly unprecedented that a hostile state, a foreign actor, would try to assassinate the former president and some of his former top deputies on U.S. soil. And the Biden administration really didn't talk about it until this year, whenever the threats really intensified. Not just threats, by the way, active plots that had to be thwarted. They didn't talk about it 3.5 years ago because they wanted to get back into the failed Obama-Iran nuclear deal called the JCPOA. And they were so eager to get back into that they buried these things. And now the chickens have come home to roost. And you see, of course, these threats. You see the meddling by Iran in the election. And listen, they picked the wrong horse to back because that it was certainly not smart to try to go after former President Trump.
But what should the Biden administration be doing, though, Morgan, in order to show that no matter who the president is, that the U.S. is going to stand up against these kinds of attempts or threats of attempts on, a leader's life?
Good question, Jackie. First of all, the Trump sanctions, the maximum economic pressure campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran from former President Trump, those sanctions never expired. And those sanctions were always on the books. The difference is that the Biden administration did not enforce those sanctions. So now we see a precarious position where Iran became $90 billion richer. So you have to get back to just simple things. Start enforcing the sanctions that are on the book. You always have to be willing to extend the hand of diplomacy. We said that all the time in the Trump administration. We were willing to talk to Iran. We were willing to negotiate at any time in any place. But it was the Iranians that constantly refused that diplomacy. And so, no one is seeking any sort of conflict by any means, but there are sanctions on the books that can be enacted right away. And you have to draw very clear red lines for the Iranians. For example, it should be totally intolerable that Iranian proxies are able to target U.S. Navy ships with ballistic missiles and other sophisticated deadly drones. They target our ships, they target our diplomatic facilities throughout the Middle East and our military facilities as well. President Trump made it clear in his first term that, one, Iran would never get a nuclear weapon, and two, that the Iranians should not, through their proxies or through themselves, hurt any American or kill any American. In fact, we saw 3 dead Americans in Jordan in January, 3 service members from an Iranian-made drone. So you have to reestablish very clear red lines for them.
So in terms of red lines, we wonder what will happen with the war in Ukraine. Trump promised in the debate that he would end the war in Ukraine before he took office. According to reports, he's already talked to Putin at least once. Here's what Axios said. Trump warns Putin in call not to intensify war in Ukraine. The source said Trump's message to Putin was roughly, don't escalate because I have weapons too. Do you expect that Trump will get this thing solved before he takes office on January 20th?
If not before, hopefully soon after. Remember, around the time that he is inaugurated is very close to the 3-year mark of the war in Ukraine. That should have never happened in the first place. It was a complete deterrence failure by Biden and Harris. Listen, what's important about Putin, the Ayatollah Khamenei, Xi Jinping, when you go around the world, it's important that these dictators respect the President of the United States. Unfortunately, this is not good for America or the world. Unfortunately, they didn't respect Biden and Harris. In fact, the last time Putin met with an administration official, he met with Harris. And 3 days later, he made the calculation to invade Ukraine. So I think that you will see a very different experience with Trump and with Vance than you saw with Biden and Harris. And you want this. I mean, listen, we're talking about the worst war on European soil since World War II. You should want that to be resolved. Going 3 years by the time President Trump is inaugurated into this long war in Europe is bad for everybody. It's bad for the Ukrainians, and it's bad for NATO, and it's bad for us ultimately. We should want peace. We should want it to end, but on our own terms.
And very quickly, there was an Axios report that said that Trump also spoke with Netanyahu 3 times in recent days. There were other reports that he's taken as many as 70 calls since he was elected. What does his election mean for negotiations to get a ceasefire and hostage deal right now with Biden still in office?
Yeah, so President Trump made it very clear throughout the campaign, and I would say out of all politicians, he is the type of politician that looks at what he promised to do during a campaign and actually, tries to enact that as policy whenever he is president. He did say that he wanted to end these long wars, that he wanted to see peace in the Middle East. I do think he actually cares very much about the plight of the Palestinian people and what's going on in the Middle East.
After being soundly beaten across the board in the 2024 election, Democrats are facing a major identity crisis. Senator Bernie Sanders and Congressman Dean.
If you have this posture where your head is forward or your shoulders are rounded forward or your upper back is hunched,
Phillips reflecting on what went wrong last week.
It's not just about the campaign. It's about what does the Democratic Party stand for? Do ordinary people say, yeah, that is a party that is fighting for my interest and prepared to take on the big money interest who control the economic and political life of the country?
You look around the country, a lot of red states were favoring Democratic policy. So I would argue, yes, our product is not the real problem. Our packaging, our messengers, and our distribution is a real problem.
Our political panel, Richard Fowler and David Avella, standing by with their take. But first, Rich Edson is live in Washington. Rich, what are other Democrats saying right now?
Now, good afternoon, Jackie. Well, they're saying they were just too progressive or not progressive enough. That's at least the basis for a back and forth between former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senator Bernie Sanders. Basically, you've got Sanders now. Pelosi told the New York Times she doesn't respect Sanders, saying that the Democratic Party has abandoned working class families, and Sanders is doubling down on that assessment.
Well, Nancy's a friend of mine, and we've worked together on many issues. But here is the reality. I have to say to Nancy, in the Senate in the last 2 years, we have not even brought forth legislation to raise the minimum wage to a living wage.
Pelosi also told the Times that had President Biden dropped out earlier, there may have been other candidates and an open primary to replace him. Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton says is defending his comments that he made to the Times that his party spends too much time trying not to offend anyone, and that as a father of 2 little girls, he shouldn't be afraid to say he doesn't want his daughters getting run over by a formerly male athlete on a playing field. Moulton says his party should also change the way it addresses immigration and public safety.
We were just told to defund the police. But actually, the police are really important to security in our communities. I mean, that's just so out of touch with American voters. So let's have these actual debates and not cancel people for simply bringing this stuff up.
Now, among the next steps for Democrats figuring out a new direction, settling on their next party chair. Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison is not expected to run for another term. The party must fill that role by March. Jackie?
And maybe the heir apparent, because when Biden's out of the White House, who takes the mantle? All right, Rich, thank you. John.
All right, let's bring in our political panel. Richard Fowler, Fox News contributor, and GOPAC chairman David Avella. Richard's smiling, so clearly the medication's working. I kid. Bill Maher said this about the loss. Listen here.
My message to the losers: losers, look in the mirror. No? Well, maybe you should. Sorry. Well, that's my feeling. Losers, look in the mirror. For months, Democrats have been saying, how is this even close? And they're right. It wasn't.
So, Richard, are they looking in the mirror? And if they are, what are they seeing and saying?
Well, I think they should be looking in the mirror in this moment, right? And I think oftentimes what you've seen over the past couple of weeks is a focus, and I like to look at this as a deck of cards, 52 cards in a deck. They're spending a lot of time focusing on the face cards. What did or didn't Joe Biden do? What didn't or didn't Kamala Harris do? But let me tell you this, a complete deck of cards is 52 cards. There are a lot of numeral cards or pip cards if you play cards a lot. And I think, and I understand the Democratic infrastructure well, and I think the problem that you have is you have a Democratic infrastructure, numbered cards that over and over again, to the point that Bernie Sanders made at the top of this segment, have failed to identify with the people who have made the Democratic Party, who elected Joe Biden, for the people who elected Barack Obama twice. And I think about Joe Biden's record, and we talked about this election night, John, right? For 4 years, Joe Biden stood by working class people. He helped settle the UAW strike, the longshoreman strike, the railroad strike. None of those were mentioned in this campaign. Nobody talked about what was actually done for working class people. And in all of those strikes, you saw double-digit raises given to those workers. It was an opportunity for the Biden campaign and for the Harris campaign that she inherited to talk about that. And once again, but for you to do that, it requires an infrastructure that is geared to the working class, that is geared to understanding what's happening to the American people, that's geared to understanding that public safety is a real problem, that's geared to understand that immigration is a real problem. And sadly, what we've seen is the people who are running the party are out of touch, and it's probably a lot of too much time in the Beltway.
All right, so if we're going to use the deck of cards analogy, in every deck of cards, there's also 2 jokers, and Lindy Lee, who's a big fundraiser for the Democratic Party, felt that she was dealt both of those. Listen to what she said.
The truth is, this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Jen O'Malley Dillon promised all of us that Harris would win. She even put videos out saying that Harris would win. I believed her. My donors believed her. And so they wrote massive checks. I feel like a lot of us were misled.
Boy, there's a lot of figure pointing going on.
Well, let's start with the obvious. I'm for them to continue keep doing what they have been doing, and we're going to actually
learn nothing from this.
That's right. And we're going to see this. I mean, you're already hearing it from Democratic governors and attorney generals who say there's just parts of Trump's agenda we're just not going to pursue. We're not going to allow. The Massachusetts governor said we're not going to participate in getting illegal immigrants who are criminals out of Massachusetts. You already hear it out of Gavin Newsom. You already hear it out of Pritzker in Illinois. And if that's the case, and we continue to have Democratic governors and attorney generals pushing the same messaging that the vice president pushed, then you're starting to look at 26, and John Ossoff in Georgia becomes a lot harder for him to win re-election. Yeah. It becomes a lot harder for Gary Peters in Michigan. So let's go back to my first comment. I'm all for them to continue doing what they're doing.
All right, well, here's what Politico said about Latino voters in the future of the Democratic Party. Why Democrats lost Latinos. That's the title of the magazine article. Donald Trump once again made large gains with Latino voters. Unless Democrats understand what is going wrong, they could be out of power for generations. What's really ironic about that quote is that it wasn't too long ago, within the last 4 years, that all the analysts were saying Republicans have lost touch with rank and file Americans. They might not win another election for generations.
It wasn't too long ago that was said, John. I think I agree with you there. Listen, I congratulate the Trump campaign for running a successful campaign. And I also, to go back to the clip that you played with that donor there, it's also sad that after giving all of those dollars, the Democratic infrastructure, the Harris-Walz campaign continued to sort of pull the wool over people's eyes. Let's be very clear. It is almost impossible. We can now say officially that it's impossible to run a 13-week presidential campaign against somebody who's running for 4 years, right? And we could acknowledge that as a true statement. Now, with that being said, I think how the party moves forward is they have to decouple and understand that every voter shows up to the ballot box with different issues. And what we saw happen, and we debated this on your show over and over again, was this hyper focus on what will black men do. And we saw what black men did. Black men voted with black women, and they're the second highest voting bloc for the Democratic Party. So instead of focusing on black men, the focus could have been on how do we talk to Latino voters? What are the issues affecting them? Instead of focusing on instead of leaning in. So what I'm saying here is remaking how you sort of make the sausage. Lean in on your base. Your base is always going to be with you. Instead of chastising your base, which you saw the party do, lean in on your base and figure out how you expand from there. African Americans seem to be with the Democratic Party. They will continue to be with the Democratic Party. How do you use them as a center and build off of that?
Quick last question to you, David, and that is that you have all of these Democratic governors, as you pointed out, Pritzker, Hochul, all of the other governors saying we're going to form the resistance against Trump. 75 million people at last count, and the number's going to go higher, said they don't want a resistance. They want Trump policies to be able to go forward. So it just seems like the Democrats aren't getting it. For them, it's all about fight, 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 resist Trump, as opposed to saying there's 75 million people, the majority of folks in this country, who think he's got some pretty good ideas. Maybe we should figure out how to get some synergy with that.
The core to your premise there is it's spot on. If Republicans do what we should do, if the Trump administration and Congress pushes the tax cuts through and extends them, if we become an energy independent country again, if we know who's coming into this country, we do just those three things in the next 2 years, voters are going to reward us. Because to your first question, which was, why did Trump do so well amongst groups that we haven't always done well? Because he treated all voters as Americans and what their concerns were, which was the economy and the border. And he said, here's my solutions. And they said, we want to go that direction.
All right. Well, we got a lot more to chew over between now and the 20th of January and then in the 4 years following that. Richard, David, good to see you. Thank you.
Take care.
Jackie?
Well, the legacy media is suffering a very public MAGA meltdown after voters send President-elect Trump back to the White House. Will anyone be punished? Jonathan Turley with Free Action.
And a live look at Manhattan's Upper West Side and the gates of Columbia University, where we expect an anti-Veterans Day protest. Paul Morrow is next on that. Live look at Columbia University, where some students there are not marking Veterans Day in a positive way, but instead they are celebrating the so-called martyrs of Gaza. Nate Foy is at Columbia. Nate, what's it looking like there today?
Well, John, according to an Air Force veteran on campus right now, he estimates that about 50 anti-Veterans Day protesters are protesting right now, with between 20 and 30 mostly veterans counter-demonstrating, supporting our military. The group that put all this together, Columbia University Apartheid Divest, according to flyers that we've seen from students on campus, are defining martyrs as anybody killed by Israeli forces, so that appears to include Hamas terrorists. Take a look at this video from campus just moments ago. We spoke with a veteran who now goes to school at Columbia, and I asked him how veterans feel after fighting terrorist organizations overseas to see students on their college campus appearing to support Hamas.
One moment I'm angry, and another moment I'm proud, because last year when there were students and faculty members dressing up as jihadists with helicopters hovering above us, veterans didn't break a single rule. I would say that most people on campus are on our side. Unfortunately, the people who aren't are the loudest.
So take a look. You see the flyer that protesters distributed on social media refusing to celebrate Veterans Day. It reads in part, quote, "The American war machine should not be honored for the horrors unleashed on others. Instead, we will celebrate Martyrs Day in honor of those martyred by the Israel-U.S. war machine." Another Columbia student tells Fox Today protesters are finally saying the quiet part out loud.
They're anti-America, they're anti-safety, they're anti-Western values, because that's essentially what the U.S. Army tries to protect.
Columbia University says it is monitoring any possible disruptions on campus. So far, we have not seen any. We'll send it back to you, John.
All right, Nate Foy for us outside Columbia University. Nate, thank you. Jackie?
Well, for more on this, attorney Paul Morrow is a retired NYPD inspector, Fox News contributor, and founder of the Ops Desk. Paul, you and I just saw that flyer that Nate Foy put up talking about what this demonstration is. But the Columbia University Jewish and Israeli students are really outraged by this. They tweeted, Columbia University Apartheid Divest, which is the group putting on this demonstration, is reclaiming Veterans Day as Martyrs Day, instead honoring all the martyrs, including the likes of Yahya Sinwar and Hassan Nasrallah, who was responsible for the murder of 241 U.S. Marines. This moral repugnance is an ingracious slap in the face to all those, including countless Columbia University student veterans who bravely risked their lives to serve their country and give CUAD the freedom to be idiots. I mean, how should we understand what is happening on campus today when, to Nate Foy's point, some are feeling that this is elevating terrorists in a way?
Well, you know, to take a step back, the not so hidden nuance here is the fact that the only reason these students are in a position to do this sort of thing is thanks to our veterans, who we all owe so much to, and which seems to be something that just goes over their heads. So I would just say that initially. But that said, we have to speak legalistically here. We have First Amendment rights in this country, and unless you are creating a danger or infringing on somebody else's rights, they have the right to do this. Now, Columbia University is a private school, and they have the ability to call in people who are calling the NYPD to remove people who might be trespassing, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it's private property. And if Columbia University wants to countenance this, they can, and clearly they are. They went way too far with that permissiveness last time. This appears to be much smaller. So my hope is going forward, these things will be kept at a low burn. They'll be kept very small. But Columbia does seem like they're willing to allow it. And again, that's our system.
Is this something keep an eye on, too? Because while, to your point, this group does have a right to demonstrate, the organizers posted on Substack this quote: Yahya Sinwar was not afraid to die. As members of the collective pursuit of Palestinian freedom, each of us should look to him as a clear illustration of what it means to devote a full lifetime to the Intifada. It's now the time for us to reflect on how we can make ourselves more like him. Make ourselves more like Sinwar? Some students are taking that to be advocacy for terrorism. Is that something law enforcement should be watching?
Yeah, very good question. You're getting close there. So, you know, the First Amendment has its limits, and generally proselytizing is not cause to open a case for material support for terrorism. There's a very, very fine line there. Traditionally, the federal government is very respectful of First Amendment rights and does not like, I've been involved in a lot of these cases. You go right up to that line, but it's getting to the point in situations like that, especially if you have other indicia, things like funding coming in from streams overseas, where you can put enough material together where you could say, okay, we need to take a look at this. And that's where, you know, it's difficult in our system. In a First Amendment system, religious and political speech is hyper protected. And yet there is that fine line where they go beyond it. You have to take a look. It's difficult because it's prophylactic. Most law enforcement happens after the fact. This is before. And that's what that right there is the balancing act that you're very, very stuck with. You're trying to have that balance, but you're getting very close when you're starting to say we need to be more like a designated terrorist.
Right. I want to also get your thoughts on the Daniel Penny trial. It's paused for Veterans Day, obviously, but jurors heard a different side than we had been hearing over the course of the trial. I want to play for you just some sound from what we heard last week.
I don't know. He's trying to attack everybody. Oh, a guy's trying to do it. Okay, give me further description. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Indian. He's black. What color? They're holding them down. They're holding him down right now. There's one man holding white man holding it down, holding the homeless guy down.
So jurors now hearing from people on the subway who felt threatened. Is that going to change the outcome, you think, of this decision that they have to make?
I mean, it certainly seems like it's going to have a major effect. Let's advance the story a little bit. This is why the cops didn't make an initial arrest at the scene, which was one of the points of protest here in New York City, where protesters were reacting without having all the facts. The cops on the scene heard all of that kind of stuff. It's on the body cam, it's in the police paperwork. And that's why their perception of it was that he was a good Samaritan. In fact, that term is in the police paperwork, and the prosecution does not want it revealed at trial because they know how that's going to sound to a jury. At the end of the day, it looks to me like the prosecution's case, if not falling apart, is really being undercut by a lot of this witness testimony.
We will continue to watch it evolve. Paul Mauro, thank you.